We fall for things that are not true. We fall for that we have strong limits, that we aren't good enough, that we are not part of the story of success of this amazing planet we walk. And the truth is, that's a lie. Every one of us are needed.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl Kate here. This is the place to find inspiring stories of world-changing women and girls every single week. We have a new unique story coming your way every single week, so make sure that you subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. One Girl Revolution is a nonprofit multimedia organization that is dedicated to elevating the voices and stories of world-changing women and girls. You can find all of our podcast episodes, watch our Emmy-nominated documentary series, donate to our nonprofit organization to help us continue our critical work to elevate women's voices and their stories, and so much more. Go to onegirlrevolution.com today. This week on the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome Celeste Mergens, founder of Days for Girls. Days for Girls is a nonprofit organization that is turning periods into power, turning periods into pathways. Days for Girls increases access to menstrual care and education by developing global partnerships. They cultivate social enterprises and opportunities for women and girls around the world. They mobilize volunteers and innovate sustainable solutions that shatter stigma and limitations for women and girls around the world. Let me break it down for you. I know that Celeste goes into all their work, but let me just break it down, the incredible work that they're doing. So they increase access to menstrual supplies. Cost-effective, safe, sustainable, and contextual relevant products help women and girls manage their periods and engage in livelihood activities. Just engage in their everyday lives. Second, they shatter stigma through education. So we know that access to timely and factual information about puberty and menstruation can lead to increased body literacy, a healthy public perception of menstruation, and decreased stigma and shame. Thirdly, they elevate menstrual health. Menstrual health and hygiene are critical factors to improving education opportunities and livelihood outcomes for women, girls, and people with periods worldwide. Lastly, and so importantly, they advocate for global policy change. Lasting change occurs when menstrual health is prioritized and integrated into regional, national, and international policy. They do so much, and I'm so excited to share their incredible work with you. Celeste shares her own story in this podcast episode, but she founded Days for Girls after a personal experience that she shares in this episode that opened her eyes to the crisis of period poverty in Africa and around the world. And she knew that she needed to do something about it, and she knew that she could. She founded Days for Girls in 2008, and the organization has been a worldwide revolution ever since. Celeste is a sought-after speaker. She's the author of a new book, The Power of Days, which I encourage all of you to pick up. I put the link in the show notes so you can easily find it and easily purchase her book, and a portion of the proceeds goes to Days for Girls, so please support them in that way. Celeste shares so many ways that we can get involved in the incredible work that she's doing, and also just to raise awareness about period poverty in our world. We can all do something, and it can be a really small thing in our own community, or it can be a big thing like what she's doing. Celeste has a really incredible and powerful life story that led her to be passionate about helping women and girls and reaching out to them in love. You do not want to miss this incredible episode, so without further ado, here's my conversation with Celeste. Celeste, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
So happy to be here with you.
I am so honored and so excited to have you on. You have a new book coming out. You have so many incredible things that you're doing with Days for Girls, which I want to talk about. But before we get into all of that, I would love to hear a little bit about your own story. I know you have a really powerful, you have so many different parts of your story that you could talk about. And I know that life is full of many chapters and you have many powerful chapters, but I would love to start and rewind back to when you were a little girl, because I know that there is a powerful story from your own life that's really led you on this path to be doing the work that you're doing. So if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing a little bit about you and your story and a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
Absolutely. Do you know those moments when you don't know that your whole life is about to change. I have like 5 of those in the arc of this story. And one of them is a really unexpected one because I was 5 years old and I was walking along a path at a state park that was serving as our home right at that moment. I was walking along the pathway and this woman walked into view and she had a half-eaten apple and she threw it into a dumpster near where we both happened to be standing. And I had honestly, it had been a little while since I'd eaten, and certainly since I'd had fresh fruit. And I honestly was looking to see if I could climb in the dumpster and still get out. And had just decided, nope, couldn't do that. When I had that feeling, that you get when someone's looking you up and down. And sure enough, she's giving me the look. And she said, "Where are your shoes, girl?" And I answered, and I remember this because I used to play it through my mind again and again. I used to think of her as Cruella de Vil from the movie. You probably know, because she's just giving me this judgmental look. And I said, "I'm toughening my feet." And in that moment, it was like a mirror turned around and I could see what she saw when she looked at me. I felt that she saw me as dirty and unkept and saw the bare feet. And my whole being wanted to say, "I am not from here. I'm not what you see. I am not." And right after that, while I was feeling small and all the things, these emotions, came a soft assurance that was, "I am not from here. I am not." And I looked to tell her that, and she'd already turned to go. But what had already happened that I didn't even see as a gift till like 5 years ago was that at such a small age, I got to be asked, "Are you the homeless girl? Are you the hungry girl? Or are you something else?" And I got to feel that assurance. I am not. And better, none of us are. We're not our circumstances. We're not where we're from. We're not what's happening to us. We're so much more than that, for good or for bad. We're so much more. And I got the seed of that really early on. So I had a really unusual pastime that I would think about. How do you help people know that they're not their circumstances? And how do you create solutions that people could own themselves so they're not stuck? They don't feel like they have no path forward to thrive. How do you do that? And I honestly, for all of my life, held that puzzle in my mind. And that moment truly was so transformative. And it's what's interesting to me today is I didn't see it for what it was until very, very recently.
Isn't that so interesting? I've had moments like that in my life that I've talked about on this podcast, where as I've gotten older, I've looked back at my life and seen specific moments like that, specific encounters with people that really led me on the path to where I am, and like why I care so deeply about women and girls and empowering their voices and their stories. And I know that aligns so much with you. And it's so important for everyone who's listening to be thinking, look back at your life and think about the ways that different pinpoints, good or bad, have led you on this path. But I'm so curious from you, it must have been so difficult, like being that 5-year-old little girl running around without your shoes. What was that experience like, being homeless? And then how did you transition out of that? That can be difficult, but I think one thing that sets women apart, or I see that sets women apart, is when we are able to change our circumstances or change our path or trajectory. We not only change the trajectory of our own lives, but we change the trajectory of generations and generations to come. And I know that you're doing that, you've done that, and you're doing it every single day. But what was that experience like as a little girl? And then how did you transition out of homelessness?
Oh, I wish I could say there was one answer. My family had seasons when we were and seasons when we weren't. We moved 32 times before I was 13. It was quite a ride. And the truth is that there was a time, and it was when the GI Bill made it possible for my dad and mother to buy a home. So we had a home now, and it was solid and nice and warm, and that was really a precious time to have that solidity of security. And we had good things in our family as well as very difficult things. And I think that one of the things that built resilience for me was to start recognizing where things were good and to start also recognizing I had another gift in this. My mother and father really struggled. There was mental illness, but I also saw my brilliant mother was played in symphonies with the violin, was fun when she was having a good day, was capable and intelligent, and also really, really, really struggled and could be dangerous. And so I learned very early that we're not one thing. My mom is both, and really loving and really gifted, and mental illness does that to a lot of people. And that's not a label that I want to put on anyone. And also, what are we afraid of? Because just like any other illness, sometimes things happen, and usually they're born of terrible tragedies that no one could blame them for coming out scarred, right? And I had the gift of being able to recognize we are not one thing, we're not good or bad. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. And if we can focus on the strengths and find paths to overcome the weaknesses, then we get to be the best of who we are. And when we give each other grace, yeah, that's okay. I adore her. When we're able to do that, everybody wins because everybody feels stronger and everybody can have more love and compassion. And that too became a gift that helped me to build the global nonprofit Days for Girls. And those stories are part of the book that's coming out, The Power of Days, because they were transformative and formative for me. And again, think of it that way, but later, if you survive with hope, it can be transformative for others as well.
Your story is so important, and so many things that you said there are so important. But even thinking about how we can judge other people, we can see someone who maybe is experiencing homelessness on the side of the street, and we make a judgment call about who we think they are, and oh, they should just get a job, or they should just do that, or they should, they probably have some whatever issue. And the reality is we're multifaceted beings, and we don't know what someone else is going through. It might be mental illness, it might be addiction. And, we all have known people or know people that are going through addiction, and it's so difficult to break that cycle, to break out of that cycle. And so having compassion and empathy, and also striving to be the change that we want to see in the world, little things that we can do. Every single person that we encounter every single day, we have the power to change the lives of others, not only change our lives, but change the lives of others. And that's a great segue into the work that you're doing with Days for Girls. How did Days for Girls start? How did you get the idea? And tell me how what that spark moment was. I'm sure that there may be many, but what was the moment that led you to start Days for Girls?
I can't even claim that I'm the founder. I often say I'm the really good listener because I hadn't thought to ask the question what they were doing for menstrual care products. And I was helping a friend in Kenya, and now why it was so important to create sustainable solutions. Every 6 months, we'd bring a few more solutions. They choose the one they wanted to lean into, we'd go with them, but always sustainable solutions were important. And so we were doing that work. I was introduced to an orphanage while working and looking at a healthcare model near the slums of Kibera. And at first I was afraid to go to the orphanage because I knew my heart would be smitten, but instead I was smitten in another way. I adored them and wanted to bring them sustainable solutions. Fast forward to 2008, about 18 months later, and post-election violence erupted in Kenya, a place that's been relatively stable because of an election that was really close. Everybody distrusted the outcome and started fighting. Neighbors fought neighbors, and now 500,000 people were displaced. And this orphanage swelled to 1,400 reported kids. Impossible if you saw the space. And they needed everything. So imagine we're doing everything. We're doing all these fundraisers to try to send enough money. We're out of everything. And then I get a call, which I'm not in charge of it. So I didn't usually get a call. And the call was, we're out of food and we have been for 2 days. I know what it feels like to go without. I know how every thought tracks back to food. You can't even sleep when you're a child. And I wanted, so it was deeply personal, and I empathized, and I wanted so badly to help. And I was pleading for some kind of genius idea to create another solution. We were headed back in 3.5 weeks. How could we not have a solution right now? And I went to bed still pleading. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning with it going through my head. Have you asked what the girls are doing for feminine hygiene? I literally went, ran to the computer, emailed, got an immediate answer, didn't expect that. And the answer was nothing. They wait in their rooms, and they were sitting on a piece of cardboard for days. No way to go to the classroom, no way to take care of themselves for days. And that was the moment we created. We were able to raise money for food and single-use disposable pads to be purchased there. But I knew if we sent money the next month and they had to choose between food and pads, foods would win, and we would want that. So how do you create a solution they could count on month after month that would free them from being in the room and stuck? And it turned out that we made the first washable pads with Days for Girls. And they weren't the design they are today because we've listened. They now hold 2 global patents for the genius of the design. But then it wasn't perfect, but we showed up. And we brought education because they said no one was teaching them what a period is. And we brought them the kits, and local women joined with us. And we had this wonderful conversation, 250 girls, 250 more waiting that needed it. Were waiting in their rooms there. And then they came to the doorway, the very first girls. There's a photo I have of their red school uniforms and huge smiles that echoes off the ceiling of the tin roof. And then they said, thank you so much. Because before you came, we had to let them use us if we wanted to leave the room and go to class. I was hoping that didn't mean what I feared it meant, but it turned out they were being exploited in exchange for a single disposable pad. And that was the moment Days for Girls was born.
If you like what you're hearing on this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. We have new inspiring episodes coming out every week, and you don't want to miss a single one. Subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast today. It's so interesting because we don't hear oftentimes about period poverty, and it's so prevalent in our culture, in our world. Mm-hmm. And then those are the extreme cases, right? That you're sharing about how these girls are being exploited, but it's happening. It's happening in our world. And situations where children are having to choose between food and period products, or being exploited, or period products. And so the work that you're doing is so critical, not to just provide these period products for girls, but also to empower them and really embrace them and help them to see their value and their purpose.
Absolutely. And you're so astute to already recognize that. Of course, it's not just there. People didn't even believe it was there when I came home. I had to ask them, go ask, or they thought it was only there. And I asked them to ask others, but it's also here. What does a foster girl do? Wherever you are, wherever here is, guaranteed it's in your neighborhood. What does a homeless person do? What does someone do that has to choose between fuel in their gas tank to go to the next job interview and a pad? We all know what's going to win. And so it is, products are expensive, and they also have unreasonable taxes on them. It's unbelievable that at this day, we still have luxury taxes on period products, that we don't have wide access, but more and more we're talking about this. And equally important is the conversation about periods. How are we going to feel about them? It's one of the world's most prevalent taboos right now. There's data right now that in the US and Canada, people would rather talk about STIs than menstruation. Come on. One connects every single one of us, because without periods, there would be no people. And one is the gift of an amazing, healthy body. One if it doesn't happen, no more people happen, not even a test tube baby. So if we can just talk about it, lean in. This is the suffragette movement of our day. We couldn't be there for votes, but we can shatter the global stigma and just normalize talking about and addressing period poverty and our amazing bodies and the education that should go with that.
I totally agree that this is such an important and critical movement. And I'm so happy to hear about women like you, or we recently had someone on from the state of Michigan who's mainly focused on period poverty in the state of Michigan, which is cool. I know there are state level initiatives going on, and people that are doing work worldwide, but we need to be talking about it more. And you're doing that. And I know that Days for Girls does so much more than just distributing the washable pads. You have education. Can you talk about all the things that Days for Girls does?
Yes, we do have washable pads, menstrual cups, education, not just for women and communities, but also for the men. And this, we have a curriculum that's been proven all over the world. It's just engaging and rich and celebrating our bodies. No agenda, just the facts. And the facts are, we're amazing. So it gives people the opportunity to talk about it. Everybody in the community. There's one called Men Who Know that asks the men, where are you strong? And one strong part of health is understanding women's health and reproductive health. So there's that education. Then there's enterprise programs, which are opportunities for local leaders to make Days for Girls washable pads and to have NGOs and others sponsor them, to have them available to communities. And they're the ones out teaching, out advocating, out making menstrual equity happen in their communities. We also have the opportunity to participate in advocacy and in the state kinds of conversations you just discussed, partnering with more and more organizations who are stepping up to take on this issue. We also partner with governments and agencies, with the Ministry of Health, Sports and Education and Gender Equity in Cambodia. We're doing a countrywide program that teaches students and teachers to engage. So it's really wonderful. Today, since that first moment I described to you, we have reached over 3 million women and girls and people with periods in 145 countries on 6 continents. And that didn't happen because of me. So back to why I said, I am the founder, and technically I'm the really good listener who shows up, keeps working, and is always paying attention. Because the truth is not about me, it's about we. It's the power of what happens when we come together, not focused on what divides us, but on what we want to see change in the world. That creates miracles.
When women stand together, when anyone, group of people stand together, we have so much power. But I think about the power of women when we stand together. And I know that's what you're really focused on. That's what we're focused on at One Girl Revolution. And I love your story too, because a lot of times people have an idea or they see a need and we end up talking ourselves out of it, right? It's like, oh, I don't have the experience. I don't know how to start something. I don't know how to get in touch with people. And I'm sure for you, a lot of it has just been like putting one foot in front of the other, getting connected to one person, and then that connects to another organization or another person, and then it grows and grows and grows and builds. And now you're doing all this amazing stuff and you have this book coming out. It must be really surreal to look back and say, oh my gosh, I'm glad that I just said yes. I'm glad I just put one foot out and started, and then look at all the great fruits that have come from it.
You're so right, because it is easy to go, oh, not me. The whole imposter syndrome, someone else, I'm not capable. The truth is, if something calls to you, go. That's part of your purpose. And the best part is, there's not one purpose for your life. There are seasons. And you can choose lots of purposes. Just focus where your heart draws you, and trust, and that you can connect with others that have the strengths that you need, that it's going to be okay. When you are following your purpose, it lifts you. It doesn't feel like a rock. It doesn't feel, and really for me, I was so, and am so passionate about this, that it didn't matter what I had to do. I just find another way around. And the truth is, for instance, people would cancel. They'd call me to come speak at their event and go, I heard great things. They were highly recommended. And then they'd call back and say, I just heard what you talk about. I'm going to have to cancel. Or people would just say really rude things about, I can't fund this after all. I just found out, I'm just not willing to do this. and they'd gone through this whole vetting. It's like, how did you do that? It was phenomenal, but we'd find another way. How do we get people to talk about something they don't want to talk about? So we did things like we had a Guinness World Record on Valentine's Day about, and we made it most pair of panties worn at once, because it was like, this is no different than talking about things that are basic like underwear. So come on, let's just do it. And we had fun making it happen, growing the conversation, and not feeling upset that someone else started doing it, but welcoming and saying, good, because it's going to take all of us to reach all of them. So come on board. How can we help you? We do have patents for our products, and we protect them because of quality. But for us, this is about a time that has come, and it's time for us all to shift this together.
Celeste, I have to tell you that when my mom was raised, she was born in the 40s, and when she started her period, it was in the culture where it was like, oh my gosh, like go in the bathroom, here's a paper bag, like don't talk about it, don't tell anybody, super embarrassing. Well, on the flip side, my mom celebrated when we started our cycles. And to people that are listening, they might think it sounds a little silly, but I think it's so beautiful. My mom would actually have a party for each of the girls in my family, and she had a little journal, and she would invite all of her lovely like lady friends, and they'd come over and then write in the journal, and it was just like a sweet little tea. And I think about that all the time, Celeste, because I'm like, how different the world would look if that's how we celebrated women and girls, and that's how we celebrated. Here you're coming into your womanhood at whatever age. I know that sometimes girls start really young. My sister started when she was 9, and but even finding those moments to celebrate it, because we should celebrate it.
Absolutely. Wow, your mom was ahead of her time. This is so beautiful. Yes, more of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My sisters and I, of course, joke about it a little bit sometimes, because we're like, even we wrote in each other's journals, and like, you're a kid, you don't know what's going on. So our messages to each other at the time were really funny. But it's just so beautiful to normalize those conversations, and you're doing that. So Celeste, this is all about stories. Of course, I wanted to hear your story. I want to hear more about everything about you. But I would love to hear a story or two about women or girls that have been helped by Days for Girls. I'm sure that there are so many that you could point to, but is there a story or two that have really touched your heart in a special way, that really show the power of the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. One of my favorites is Leela in Nepal. So Nepal has a tradition where you're untouchable during your period. And if you don't know what a period is, everything we relate to blood is injury or illness. So it's easy to understand how you would make it that you could curse your family, that someone could die, that livestock could die, that bad things could happen. And so they're willing to risk their lives and stay in sheds in Nepal, where the elements are very difficult and harsh, where they could be bit by a snake. Another girl died probably, I think, 5 weeks ago now in a shed. And it is against the law now. It's been against the law since 2005. It's a finable offense since 2018. But it goes on because they want to protect their families, like any of us would. So this amazing woman is part of Days for Girls Nepal team, and they make Days for Girls kits. They go do the education, and she was from an area called Calicut that has prevalent practice of this untouchable practice that you're not able to be with others. And she said, I want to take this back to my community. And she was willing to leave Kathmandu and return to harsh conditions to do that. So when she was little, she had to wait in the forest, wondering why she couldn't be with her family, not enough protective clothing or blankets to be warm, shivering, alone, afraid. And now there are sheds and there are huts, but they're just like, you can't even stand in them. And you're in there for days. And if you just had a baby, you're in there for 10 to 21 days with a newborn. And so it's very difficult. You can't eat the food that your family has. You're given breadcrumbs on a small plate, and it's pushed to you so that you lean out so you don't both touch the plate at the same time. And it's that taboo. This amazing woman was willing to walk pathways and get the whole team to teach the communities, this is what a period is. And actually, it's amazing. And what if you had a pad that you could ritually cleanse that and practice this in a new way and honor your tradition, but get your days back and protect your family. What if you did that? And community by community times over 19,000 have been freed from the shed, know what it is, are invited to make new decisions, and in some cases have torn down the sheds with their own two hands. Something that didn't happen because of the law, didn't happen because of fines, but happened because of education and an invitation that didn't shame, but invited new ways to be. And that to me, and she's just so inspiring that she turned a very difficult thing into a way to reach her community and free them from it.
And I'm sure that her story, like so many others, it has a ripple effect, right? When somebody sees someone like that who is empowered, and it gives other people the courage to stand up. And that's what I love so much about all of these stories too, with One Girl Revolution, is when any of us step forward and strive to be the change or stand up for ourselves or stand up for others, it has a ripple effect and changes the world in bigger ways than we ever could have imagined. And that's exactly what she's done. And what her story continues to do, because you're sharing it. Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world, dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate. Where do you hope that Days for Girls goes from here? In your dream of dream worlds, this podcast is all about big dreams, 5 or 10 years down the line. Where do you hope that Days for Girls goes, and what impact do you hope to have on the world?
I hope we get every girl, every person with periods, that periods are no longer a problem for anyone. That's what I want. And I used to, when I first said that, people would say, that's unreasonable. It's not measurable or achievable. And the truth is, it is, because we're measurable, right? So it's just corrective solutions, whatever that is for them, plus talking about it, replicating it, reaching out, everybody being part of the solution. Repeat, this is doable and achievable. We have chapters that work and make Days for Girls kits and get them into communities and seed areas that can have entrepreneurs now running there and strong programs there. And also they reach refugees in emergency situations. And then we can do this. This is something we can do in our lifetimes. And that's what I'm calling, that's what I'm holding, because we can and we should. And in my opinion, we must.
We have a responsibility, and you're doing it, and you're such an example. And I can't wait for people to get involved in the great work that you're doing, continue to follow. But I have to ask you, we mentioned earlier about your book. You have this book coming out. I'm so excited. The Power of Days, a story of resilience, dignity, and the fight for women's equity. What can you tell me about this incredible book?
Oh, I'm so excited for people to read it. There are some hard stories in here, but there are a lot of beautiful stories, and a lot of, like the one you just heard, that people doing amazing things and overcoming things. And all of it is proof that if instead of focusing on what divides us, what we distrust, what we don't want to happen in the world, if you instead say, we have this goal in common, let's focus there, miracles happen, like miracles. And the book covers a lot of them. They're almost unbelievable. Thank goodness there's proof. And it happens when we come together and we decide that change is going to happen on our watch. I like to say that Days for Girls in the menstrual movement is the New York of development issues. Because if you could take on one of the greatest taboos in our world and create a movement, then you could create any kind of solution. And one of the outcomes of the book, besides seeing over and over again the hope and that we aren't our circumstances and that people are amazing, and each one of us, we don't have to be a superstar to change things. Just stand where your heart calls you. And all the proof of what happens when we come together. The other thing my heart wish for this is that people will recognize themselves as a change maker and see that we don't have to be in silos. we can actually trust each other, pull each other in, find where we have common ground, and stand for the things we love. It doesn't have to be menstrual equity, but stand for the thing that's calling you, because in my opinion, one of the most dangerous things we're facing right now is the otherness being perpetuated in so many parts of society. You can talk about this, but not that. And you're in this box, but you're in this box. And also, I don't trust you, because that is dangerous, more dangerous than snakes and chapati huts to me. Because, and I'm not trying to be flippant about that. I'm just saying our whole world is being set on fire because of hatred and distrust. And the whole time, I have 3 passports of proof that what we have in common is way more than what we have in differences. We can do the things we would love to have happen in our amazing world right now. We just have to decide. No more silos. We're leaning in to each unique strength within each of us.
That's beautiful. And it's such a great reminder, because we look at everything that's going on in the world and even the media, where everything is divisive, especially when it comes to women. Everything's divisive. We're so often politicized, and that's not making the changes that need to happen. And so that's why this podcast exists. That's why we share stories like yours. And I can't wait to share your book. I will share the link in the show notes, and then also all on social media. We will promote it, because I can't wait for people to read it and continue to follow the great work that you're doing. Celeste, I'm so curious if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do every single day, because you also are seeing these great successes, these very joyful moments where you're able to help people, but also you've seen some really horrific situations like you shared earlier. And I'm sure that there are some days where it's like, why am I even doing this? If you could get to the very root of why you do what you do, the driving force of why you do what you do every single day, what would you say that root is?
I believe in people. Sorry, I get emotional. I believe in love. And I believe in what's possible for all of us. And I think I owe that to some of the stories that I shared with you early. We fall for things that are not true. We fall for that we have strong limits, that we aren't good enough, that we are not part of the story of success of this amazing planet we walk. And the truth is, that's a lie. Every one of us are needed. Every one of us are unique, since our very weaknesses hold the strengths that we need to rock this world. And our very weaknesses, just like that experience of seeing the Apple moment happen, are often the reason we are the voice that will stand with all our might. We never know. And I really want the world to know that. I really genuinely believe every person matters. And I hope that's my love letter to the world. I want people to know they matter.
We're as unique as our fingerprint. And I oftentimes talk about that on this podcast. If we looked at our fingerprint every single day and remembered that we were the only person, this only person that ever existed and that will ever exist with our fingerprint, and we have a responsibility to leave that imprint on this world, how differently we would live our lives. And you're doing that. You're such an example to all of us. And I can't wait to see where Days for Girls goes from here, where you go from here. I know there's so many great things on the horizon, but what can people do to support your great work? And what can they do in their own communities to emulate the work that you're doing?
Thank you for asking. Days for Girls has an amazing website, daysforgirls.org. You can find a chapter to volunteer with near you. You can create a chapter. You can do a fundraiser for Days for Girls and help reach more communities. And you can also advocate and help your community speak about this and change any laws that need to change, and be a community that's very period positive. You can also buy the book, because a portion of proceeds goes to Days for Girls. And the whole goal of this book is to help people elevate this conversation and have conversation about what else do we need to look at that we weren't, because it was hidden and taboo. What else can we take on? I'm looking forward to the powerful conversations to come.
Well, I will be sure to put your website, all your social media links in the show notes, as well as the link to the book so people can easily find it. So all they have to do is go to the show notes and they can find it. And we will also post all of that on social media. Celeste,
Thank you.
I always end this podcast on 2 questions. So I'd like to ask you, you are a one girl revolution. That's why I had you on this podcast. You're doing amazing things every single day to change the world. But who is a one girl revolution in your life? Who is a woman or girl that inspires you?
Oh, that's really hard. I'm going to have to go with Dr. Peterson in 6th grade. Here's why. This is a teacher who looked beyond the exterior that you might judge or send somebody to the side and see them as invisible, and instead kept asking me to show up as a leader, kept giving me art and other things, and kept seeing the inside. And I think seeing people like you're doing on this podcast, asking for voices to be elevated, inviting people to see each other is truly powerful. And that one woman, who, by the way, also was always referred to as Dr. Peterson in a time where women weren't always referred to that way, and was principal of our school and a 6th grade teacher. This was a woman that knew how to rock the world. And this was a woman who was willing to see others no matter what.
Celeste, I think you might be the first person that ever brought up a teacher, surprisingly enough, on this podcast. We're almost at 200 episodes, and I don't remember a single person bringing up a teacher. So shout out to all the teachers out there and Dr. Peterson, because they really have so much power with young people and really empowering them and seeing them. And at the end of the day, all of us, all we want to be is seen and heard and just loved. And I know that Dr. Peterson did that for you in 6th grade, which is amazing. So Celeste, to end this podcast, I always end on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
You are enough. You've got this. You matter. Period.
Celeste, thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you. This has been really fun.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number 1 Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number 1 girlrevolution.com.